Hello, Slava Ukraini.
Hey, Heroim Slava. It's been a while.
Yeah, and happy Independence Day. I'm very happy to be back. I really miss this, really, really so much. I know that we haven't had an actual break because we kept releasing podcast episodes and recordings, but I really missed our live broadcasts a lot.
Yeah, same. And for those of you who haven't yet listened to season 1 of our podcast, I think we have over like 33 episodes with 33, if not more, amazing Ukrainians for you to listen to as well. So yeah, we were busy uploading things, but it's now all available for you to listen and consume. So hope you enjoy it.
We actually have a new social media platform separate that we launched specifically just for Ukrainian spaces, and I'm pinning the tweet with a collection of episodes, links to episodes from the previous season to this conversation. So yeah, if you missed of any of those fantastic 34 conversations, you still have time to check them out.
So we are going to kick off with a little introduction and a reminder for everyone here about what Ukrainian Spaces is. And we'll do it really fast because we have amazing speakers today, Olek and Aurora, with us, who will lead the conversation on Taiwan and Ukraine. But just to remind everyone, welcome to our first episode of Season 2 of Ukrainian Spaces, which is a podcast that elevates Ukrainian voices and decolonizes conversations about Ukraine. And why are we here? Well, the reason is that even 6 months into Russia's full-scale invasion of Ukraine, many conversations about Ukraine still seem to be dominated by Western pundits, and we see that every day. What many of these people seem to miss is the necessity to look at what's going on in Ukraine through the lens of Ukrainians and through the lens of Russian colonialism. So essentially, what this sort of lack of representation of Ukrainians within the global media discourse on Ukraine means is that it continuously robs us of our agency and perpetuates outdated and misleading and false narratives. So we're here to foster a relaxed and safe space for Ukrainian voices to express themselves and for everyone else to educate themselves and decolonize their views of Ukraine. And quickly, how is Season 2 different? Season 2 is going to be different because we are going to be doing crossover episodes with featured guests from a country that has a lot in common with Ukraine. And essentially our common lens will always be anti-colonialism. For us, that colonial power is Russia. For others, it's something else. So today we're starting with Taiwan. The reason for it, I think it's quite obvious. We've seen Taiwan a lot in the news. But essentially, more broadly, we just want to be able to build global solidarity and feature our allies outside of the West to keep these conversations going. So, apart from all of this, Maksym, you briefly said already that you missed our podcasts, but are you looking forward to Season 2?
I think today I re-listened to all our episodes, of course, as we were uploading them, and they often start at the place where we, sometimes very dark places when we share that what is happening around us and the genocidal crimes that we witnessed just before going live. And I think today is no different, unfortunately, as so many rockets are raining down on our Ukraine today in a genocidal retribution for us just existing. I think this is something that is anchoring me and the project and the broadcasts and the podcast where we can keep doing what is important. And at this point, we can help to amplify Ukrainian voices, making sure that their truths live and as loud as possible. And this is something, everyday reason to come back and keep doing that and keep pushing for, because this is ultimate, will definitely lead to the victory. But without that, it wouldn't be possible for me to keep sanity, I think. This is really anchoring experience for Ukrainians who participate as well. I hope we all share that.
For sure. And I think one of the main things is that it helps me personally, and I don't know how about everyone else, but it really helps me sort of fight this, I guess, fake fear of isolation that many of us Ukrainians have been feeling over the past 6 months and still continue feeling.
Oh, by the way, I mean, you wrote today, a lot of Ukrainians shared fantastic stories about what they feel on this Independence Day, especially in these horrific circumstances. But you wrote a very powerful thing. I really would love you to read it out loud for everyone else. It's not long, but I feel like it sets up right tone, not only for today, but for second season as well. Can you do that, please? And I'll pin the whole thread to the broadcast.
Yeah. So I was actually writing this thread not in relation to Independence Day, but then today woke up and thought that it's super important to talk about it today. It's obviously a different kind of Independence Day for Ukraine today. And I myself am essentially 1 year younger than Ukraine's latest iteration of independence from the Soviet Union. But in my thread, I basically say that I still haven't turned off the air raid alarm signals on my phone since I got back from Ukraine a week ago. But every time it goes off and I see the small notification on my phone screen saying air raid alert, immediately go to the closest shelter, I can't stop but have one thought in my mind. What if this was my last trip back home, and what if I never see my family and friends again? But days like today, like Ukraine's Independence Day and everything that you're seeing on social media and in the media, make me realize that my fears are irrational, because the unity of the people will overcome even the biggest of threats. So 31 years ago, just a year before I was born, Ukraine was once again independent from the despotic rule of the Soviet Union. Soviet Union, obviously the heir of the Russian Empire, which continued its colonial and imperial practices of subjugating millions of people around the world. And every year Ukrainians celebrate this day with honor and pride, but today is different because we celebrate with resilience, bravery, hope, solidarity, unity, and a passion to once and for all put an end to Russian imperialism. Because if Russian imperialism continues to exist, imperialism everywhere continues to exist, and this definitely needs to end. And so today I just really hope that I have one hope for the future, which is for the world to finally listen to those who have been ignored for years and to once again return back home. And I think this nicely leads us to our conversation.
No pressure, Oleg, because after that it's very easy to come up with something powerful as well. Oleg, if you can hear us, please come join. I'm gonna tell everyone else that we haven't changed the rules, and Ukrainians in our spaces introduce themselves, although Oleg is joining us not for the first time, and it's a nice tradition. He opened season first as well. Olek, hey, how are you?
Hi everyone. Hi Maksym, Val, and everyone. Heroям Slava. And of course, happy Independence Day. As happy as it can Independence.
Be. Yep, for sure. So tell us, please. First of all, you can quickly introduce yourselves, although I'm pretty sure our regular listeners already know you're part of the family, but who you are. But also tell us how your life has changed in the last 6 months, because, it feels sometimes like it's been 6 months, 60 years, or just one day, and all at the same time.
Yeah, for sure. Well, hi everyone. My name is Olek. Short for Alexander. I know it's an unusual way to shorten Ukrainian Alexander, but that's just a little bit easier for non-Ukrainian speakers. And I'm not Taiwanese, actually. I'm Korean Ukrainian, and I grew up in Ukraine, and then I moved to Korea very recently. To Taiwan very recently in fall last year. And I had plans, like all people, I guess, moving to Taiwan, but then it changed a lot, and like many Ukrainians here, I had to find another focus that integrates supporting Ukraine, of course, because there's no other way to do this right now. And I was one of the people behind Taiwan Stands with Ukraine, which is a Taiwanese movement where people from, well, not just Taiwanese, but from all countries, people living in Taiwan, support Ukraine, organizing events and doing advocacy online and offline. And currently we're working on the Independence Day event for this Saturday, which is also going to be a fundraising charity market. And that is currently taking most of my energy. And I am also a founder of Ukrainian Voices, well, more specifically Ukrainian Voices Taiwan, which is a group, a hub, we like to call it, of Ukrainian students and researchers living in Taiwan. And what we do is we run educational platforms on Facebook and Instagram where we talk about Ukraine, all things related to Ukraine, but mostly focus on things that people will not see on the news, of course. And what Val said in the beginning, looking at Ukraine through a post-colonial, anti-colonial lens is something that we proactively try to adopt here in conversations about Ukraine and Taiwan, but mostly we talk about Ukraine, obviously. And
thank you so much. I mean, I wanted to, I've pinned some of your work already on during this conversation. And I will pin your episode when you first came, I think it was late March, to Ukrainian Spaces. And I remember that it was like all mostly like 100% about our pain, what we were witnessing happening to our country. Our both families are, on occupied lands now. And it fills me with so much joy to see you growing into this important, one of the key Ukrainian voices explaining Ukraine back to the world in the last 6 months, launching these projects, growing your audience immensely in the last 6 months. And this is, I feel, quintessentially Ukrainian, how we manage to harness this pain and this trauma into something creative, nevertheless. So thank you so much for that.
Thank you. And of course, we have a guest with us today, Aurora, Olek's friend, and we have the same rules for our guests here, whether you're Ukrainian or not, to introduce yourself and tell our audience a little bit about what you're doing and who you are. And Olek will take the conversation on from there. But Aurora, please.
Hi everybody. Thank you for having me. I'm Aurora. I am Taiwanese, and I've also been helping out with Taiwan Stands with Ukraine since the beginning of the Russian invasion. I guess a little bit about my background is that I have lived in many countries besides Taiwan. I've been in Singapore, in the US, and I went to the UK for university. And that's when I started getting into, I guess, activism with Hong Kong protests and Uyghur solidarity campaigns. And I think for me, the reason why I even started joining efforts with like the people from Taiwan Stands with Ukraine is just that there are a lot of obvious parallels between how Russia treats Ukraine to how China treats Taiwan. And in mainstream media and a lot of journalists, they like to talk about Taiwan in terms of these other big powers, so in terms of China or in terms of the United States, and it's never about Taiwan. It's always about how China wants to do what or the US wants to do what. And one of the, I'm part of a grassroots organization in Taiwan, a leftist grassroots organization that organizes events and tries to open like conversation online to talk about decolonization of Taiwan and anti-imperialism in a way that centers Taiwanese voices. So in that sense, I think there's that's why I am an ally to Ukraine, and that's why I started like attending events with Taiwan Stands with Ukraine.
Thank you so much, Aurora. And of course, Olek, you live in Taiwan as well yourself, and you're Ukrainian, so you've probably been seeing a lot of these similarities as well. But I just, was wondering how it felt maybe first for you as a Ukrainian in Taiwan right now, experiencing the war from this perspective as well, and relating back to a lot of the things that Aurora was saying.
Yeah, for sure. And I'm sure that most Ukrainians living here felt this, an immense solidarity that we receive and support that we receive from Taiwanese people. And it's, well, from the government, obviously, but also from the people, and just people on the streets and people who come to our events and people online. There's a lot of it, and it definitely helped to cope with pain or with misunderstanding that we sometimes face, and even in what we're doing in Ukrainian Voices Taiwan here, when we post content about questions that are very important to us, and we can see that people understand what we're talking about, and many of those conversations resonate with them. Like the other day, my colleague was writing a piece about why Ukraine and Russia are not brotherly nations. Because, as I told you last time we met on Ukrainian Spaces, in the beginning of this new invasion, many journalists in Taiwan actually misunderstood this narrative, and many wrote about how this invasion is a temporary problem in what used to be a brotherhood. And then my friend wrote about what is the problem behind calling us brotherly nations, why it's untrue, and who promotes this narrative and why. And people started reacting to this, and some people would come and say that, we don't hear this on TV. This is something that only Ukrainian people can tell us, and we understand you entirely. There's one comment that I didn't understand it in the beginning because I don't speak Chinese, unfortunately, but I did Google Translate it, and it really stayed in my memory. It goes, 我们完全懂你们. We entirely understand you, Ukrainian people. So I think saying that Ukraine and Taiwan are in the identical situation would not be correct, and I don't really want to discuss geopolitics or foreign policy, whatever. But if you see the conversations that Ukrainians and Taiwanese have, and once we try to talk to each other, how those conversations sink and how our understanding sinks, I think is a real indication of how similar we actually are. And for sure, it makes our work much easier here, even despite not having an embassy or a representative office here, which I feel like is a big miss for us, because yes, Taiwanese people do get us.
But I know that the work that you do and Taiwanese activists actually made some waves back in Ukraine. So for the first time ever, we have a parliamentary caucus for that takes care of the relations and friendship between Taiwan and Ukraine. It was announced just a week ago, a massive change. And also, I've seen so many Ukrainians sharing videos, very inspiring videos from Taiwan, especially when American Speaker of the Congress visited, and Taiwanese showed just viral display of Ukrainian solidarity, linking everything that is happening in the world around this story about genocide in Ukraine and other imperial colonial power trying to suppress democracies. So I know, Olek, you had also questions. We wanted to empower you to ask questions, Aurora, and lead this conversation. But before you do that, I really wanted to also send thanks to our patrons and sponsors, because Ukrainian Spaces exists, expands, develops, and becomes more professional thanks to the growing support of our sponsors on Patreon. We already have almost 100 of them, and thanks to you, we can have a team, we can have fantastic evolution of this project going further. And our sponsors get a lot of extra cool stuff, extra cool content on our Patreon page, but also they have front seat if they want to ask questions. You can leave them during the broadcast in our DMs or on Patreon page, and we can always arrange that because this show exists because of you and thanks to you. So wanted to do that shout out. Olek, you go ahead because I know that you also wanted to ask some questions, Aurora, as well.
Yeah, so if you could just highlight one of those. Oh, you are already. Yeah, so how I actually got to know Aurora was on Twitter in the beginning of the full-scale invasion. And I'm sure you remember, Ukrainians were very desperate for support, for recognition in the beginning, and we needed to hear that the world is supporting us. And me too, living here in Taiwan, I was looking through my Twitter and Facebook and Instagram and trying to see what are Taiwanese people actually saying. And one of the tweets that went viral early in the beginning was Aurora's. It was a picture of a bear, which is Taiwanese bear, holding a sign and saying something like, "We support Ukraine." And then I followed Aurora's conversations about why actually Taiwanese people choose to support Ukraine. So I guess that's something that I would like to hear from Aurora, if you don't mind sharing with us, with Ukrainians and non-Ukrainians here. What does it mean for you, solidarity with Ukraine, and why specifically Taiwan, among other countries in Asia and East Asia, is showing this much solidarity?
I think also I wanted to respond to some of the things you said earlier, Olek, about what Taiwanese journalists said, like falling for the brotherly nations narrative, and also just how journalists have behaved at some of our protests in general. I've been to a lot of these events, and I get questions a lot, and they love to ask, like, do you think that now that the war has broken out in Ukraine and Russia has invaded Ukraine, do you think that China will do the same to Taiwan? And I always like to say that I think it's prudent to be more critical when we're comparing Ukraine and Taiwan, because even though there are a lot of surface level parallels, the geopolitical circumstances are still different. So yeah, thank you, Olek, for bringing that up. And on the tweets, yeah. So I actually studied history, politics, and economics of Eastern Europe and Russia in university. So it's an area that I wouldn't say I'm an expert in it still. I was just an undergrad, but I've been following it and have been interested in it for a while, and been following the news since the beginning. And I saw from the very start that there were people in online spaces who were saying that the Russian invasion was justified, or that what Russia is doing is okay because of all sorts of reasons. And it just sounded really, really similar to what the same group of people were saying about why Taiwan is like a part of China. Taiwan has always been a part of China, and that we are renegade province, stuff like that. Which is why it's a very emotional thing, and that's why I made those tweets, and that's why from the very beginning I drew the Taiwan Heishong, the Formosan bear, saying 乌克兰加油, which means add oil Ukraine, like good luck Ukraine. It's because I support Ukraine. I am an ally to Ukraine, and I think Ukraine will prevail, and Ukraine should prevail because it's what is just. And to circle back to what Olek mentioned earlier about the brotherly nations rhetoric, It's good that you brought it up because I actually have so much to rant about. I know that Putin has been using a lot of ethno-nationalist language to talk about Ukraine, Ukrainians, Ukrainian history, and using the idea of like the Kievan Rus to justify, his crazy expansionist ambitions or whatever. And that kind of language, it's really scary to me because it's basically very, very similar in tone, in rhetoric, like to what I see Chinese officials say about Taiwan, what the CCP deploys against Taiwan. Like some common phrases are, Taiwan has been an inseparable part of China since antiquity, or that we are all descendants of the dragon, and that China, quote unquote, reunifying Taiwan, like invading us, taking us back, would be like for the greater good, for like the restoration of a great Chinese nation. And all of this, like what Russian officials have been saying, what Chinese officials have been saying, it's ethno-nationalist propaganda because they are imperialists. They are using this kind of language to justify imperial expansion. And that's like the core of why I support Ukraine and why I think solidarity is so important, because we Taiwanese people, Ukrainian people, we have the right to self-determination, and we have the right to defend ourselves when our countries are under threat and when there are these big imperialist superpowers threatening us, threatening our survival. Russia is committing genocide against Ukrainians. China is committing genocide against, well, not Taiwanese, not right now, but against Tibetans, against Southern Mongolians, against Uyghurs. And we've seen what they did to Hong Kong in just like the past 2 years. And in Taiwan, that's another thing that's brought up a lot, is that maybe today, like yesterday Hong Kong, today like Taiwan will be next after Hong Kong. And that's something that people have also been saying like as well, is that maybe after Ukraine, Taiwan will fall. And it's very alarming.
Yeah, absolutely. And also, I think this is a powerful parallel that we as Ukrainians and also Taiwanese are trying to bring attention to everyone else all the time, that this is kind of a serial behavior by tyrannies, assaulting, attacking democracies. So we might, it's not about ethnicity, it's not about geography, but first and foremost, it's about tyrannies versus democracies and free people. And I think this is something that people fail to see very often. And thank you so much for bringing it up, because I think this is the backbone of our anti-colonial solidarity, because we feel this moment and we share this feeling so powerfully, Taiwanese and Ukrainians.
Yeah. And, we were saying in season 1 as well that a lot of these feelings that you were describing as well, when you were saying, I straight away understood the way that, Russia treats Ukraine and what Russia is doing now through my own experience. And a lot of the things we thought, we never verbalized a lot of the things that we felt before. And it's just really great to hear you describing this as well. And that, we're not alone in thinking that there are these similarities, of course, with a lot of differences. But in general, it's just very helpful as well for Ukrainians. And I guess you can tell me, for Taiwanese to know that, we are understanding each other in this sort of common fight against imperialism everywhere. But I wanted to ask you a question as well. Part of the reason, so we've obviously seen a lot of like global solidarity with Ukraine across the board, but I was just wondering, would you say how would you say the solidarity has been in general in Southeast Asia, and is there anything that we can do better to get more people on board and to get more people to support Ukraine?
I think if you're referring to Southeast Asia and East Asia, I guess, I do think that there's actually an inbuilt audience in Southeast Asia for support for Ukraine, which is the Milk Tea Alliance, which is kind of like a loose online coalition of activists and supporters of from a lot of different countries, like Myanmar, Thailand, Hong Kong, Taiwan, and we share similar goals, which is that there are powers that are trying to subjugate us, and the Milk Tea Alliance has been around for a while, and I think the Milk Tea Alliance has also been very supportive of Ukraine.
Yeah, sorry, I meant Southeast Asia and East Asia. And do you think there's sort of having these conversations as well between people is something that will help us propel these conversations forward from people with different experiences with Ukrainians and others elsewhere?
Oh yeah, no, I do think it's definitely helpful. Just the same way, like how we're talking right now, how we can share like about what's similar in our experiences and also what's different, and to see if there is a way out, like in this fight against imperial powers.
Yeah, of course, it translates differently in every place. Like in Japan, there's their own situation that helps them kind of support Ukraine or feel like they want to support Ukraine. In Korea, it's a different thing. And we see activists and we see communities, and these days, they all merge. There's active people, there's people online, there's just general diasporas, Ukrainian diasporas living in those countries, and there's official Ukrainian representatives, like workers from an embassy. They all work together because these days they're just working as one team in every of those countries. But I do think that we sometimes lack, this kind of, should I say, coalition, at least if I speak about the East Asia. Because, as I said, in every country, people approach this differently with slightly different sentiments. And given the politics and geopolitics, I feel like, for example, making communities in Korea and Japan cooperate would be hard because of the strained relations between these two countries. But it's great that groups in each of those countries, they're working on for their local audience, and they're doing their best. And we know them and we see them, and I'm sure you'll bring them on your wonderful show. I think you have to. It's going to be a revelation for people to see the Ukrainian and pro-Ukrainian solidarity movement in those countries as well. And then going back to something that Aurora mentioned that I think is very important is one of the scariest things about these kind of expansive, invasive policies is how it translates right now within the information space, and the way they take away our voice and our capacity to explain ourselves, describe ourselves, and I'm sure you Ukrainians have had those conversations when you meet a person and you're trying to say something about yourself, and it turns out they already know everything about your country and how it should be invaded and why it's wrong and why it's so Nazi and so on and so on. And I hear from the Taiwanese people that often that is also the case for Taiwan, when people already have preconceived notions about Taiwan and the way Taiwan should be and the way Taiwanese people should be. And one of the tweets on highlight here, I won't find it right now, is from okay, I'm not going to be able to retell it because I'll have to read it. But last time when we talked in the last episode, the time capsule episode, remember when it was a lot of us and some of us gave kind of like their favorite Ukrainian word or phrase, and mine was by Shevchenko, "В своей хате своя правда." In your own house you have your own truth. The truth is your own. And I think that pretty much applies to both Ukrainians and Taiwanese, to remember that you are the primary source of information about yourself, and you, the people, are the primary source of information about your country. No one else can come and say, well, they, this and this and this. And I made sure that on Ukrainian Voices, we posted this phrase by Shevchenko, and we do it always in both English and Mandarin, although there's like a lot of other languages in Taiwan. And the way people reacted was they understood, the meaning of this phrase. And it was, I think, around the time when people, around the time, with the Pelosi's visit to Taiwan and all that. And people, it resonated with people, and someone actually read the poem. And the poem goes, «Хаті своя правда і сила і воля», and then it goes, «Нема на світі України, немає іншого Дніпра». There's no other Ukraine and there's no other Dnieper River. And then there's this friend of mine who came to me and he said, I had an urge to repost this and say there's no other Taiwan and there's no other s2e River. I'm not sure how that aligns, but I can see that it resonates with people so much. Yeah.
I can also testify that I've been approached by so many people, including from East Asia, but outside of Europe, constantly saying, especially those who are passionate allies and they want to honor Ukrainian culture amid genocide, to learn more, to read more Ukrainian authors. You cannot imagine how many people would come back to me and say, like, I read this, Shevchenko, or I read Lesya Ukrainka, or I read Franco, and I feel it as if it's written for my own country. And usually those people come from countries that are also oppressed by various forms of colonialism or have this history. So I think this is an important bridge, literature, that we can also try to foster and people learn. And we should also read more by Taiwanese authors. I'm super grateful for you to constantly calling out Ukrainian politicians online, saying that they should show more support and more appreciation for Taiwanese solidarity and be vocal about it without the fear of upsetting China, which is sometimes the case. I hope that culture will change, at least like in many countries in Europe. They are doing that in Czech and Lithuania and small countries with very long history of being oppressed by colonialism. They feel this passionate solidarity with Taiwan despite the consequences, dire consequences that they pay for speaking up in China and economically black
Yes,
people.
and I can feel that in the Ukrainian society as well, there's a lot of, and I'm curious if Aurora also feels this way, in Ukrainian society, especially after all this very widely discussed visit of Pelosi to Taiwan. I've noticed that people on Twitter who have both Ukrainian and Taiwanese flags are not majority Taiwanese anymore. That many of them are now Ukrainians who add a Taiwanese flag, showing support to Taiwan. And I think there's definitely this massive realization in the Ukrainian society that supporting Taiwan is the just thing to do, because, well, politics aside, it's just a human thing to support someone's aspiration to be free in their own house, as Shevchenko said. And and I'm sure this will reach our political elites sooner or later. We can see local governments in Ukraine already not being shy, expressing gratitude to Taiwan for millions of dollars and all sorts of solidarity and support. And I'm sure that the political elites in our country will realize that you cannot hide behind other things anymore, and you have to see Taiwan and you have to understand and say thank you.
Yeah, you have to see Ukraine as well. I wanted to also ask a quick question to Aurora and also maybe Olek, because we have a question from our Patreon, Maggie, and she basically asked a question we often ask on the show ourselves. In your personal activism of spreading the word around, both about Taiwan, Ukraine, our anti-colonial struggles, is there a single example, something effective that always works for you to build that bridge to people outside your own community to recruit them? Can you think of anything like that? Maybe Aurora, you go first.
Yeah, thank you for the question. I think for me, I would consider my in-person organizing activism different from what I'm doing on my Twitter account, because the audience and the reach is quite different. And I think in person, when I'm talking to Taiwanese people about Ukraine, the easiest thing is really just to, well, remind them that we are Taiwanese and that China is doing talking about doing very similar things to us, and that because we are Taiwanese and many of us, we are sympathetic, so that generally works in person. But online on Twitter especially is a completely different beast, because I mainly tweet from a more leftist perspective, and it just so happens that a lot of communists or Marxist-Leninists that are from the West tend to speak over Ukrainians, speak over Taiwanese people, speak over people who are actually victims of imperialism right now. I have not myself found a good bridge to convince these people that my country's agency matters. So I would also love to hear from Olek about this.
I think, unlike Aurora, I don't really engage in conversations with people with such opinions much, I guess. But we all know about this problem, right? And what big organizations do towards Ukraine, and we can understand, like Amnesty. Yeah. I try to save energy and to avoid those conversations, but I'm happy that there are people who actually do those conversations and try to convince people. I know that there's a lot of people from the left in my surrounding, but naturally those who I see already align themselves with Ukraine, So I guess it's hard to answer. Outside of that.
No, for sure. I think you really need to pick your battles, right? And see where to put your energy into fighting that or not. But I also wanted to ask, and Olek, we asked you this in our episode with you, I think around 6 months ago when all of this started, but I also wanted to ask Aurora about her experience. We talk, and if you feel comfortable, of course, sharing some of this, we talk here quite a bit about our personal experiences of growing up in a country that has always experienced sort of another power, imperial power, colonial power. And we just wanted to ask you about your personal experience of what suppression by colonialism means and how it has manifested in your life, or what has it kind of had, how has it had an impact on you growing up and on the person you are today?
Honestly, the path that I am on right now, the work that I do, the degree that I chose in university and the work that I do right now, I don't think any of this would have happened if I hadn't been born Taiwanese. Sometimes I feel like being born Taiwanese, you are born having to be an activist. It's, how do I explain this? So when I was younger, when I was still living in Taiwan, I was kind of sheltered, didn't really understand cross-strait relations, like our complicated history with China, as like a real thing. It was an abstract that you would learn about in history textbooks, but I didn't really understand what it meant. When I moved to Singapore in secondary school, I was around like 13, 14. It was my first time meeting Chinese people from China and interacting with them. And I remember that I joined the Chinese drama club in my school because I thought that I would be able to connect with people who also spoke Mandarin. And the first day there, the teacher asked a question. She said, so who of you here is not from China? And I raised my hand because I'm not from China. And she asked, okay, so where are you from? And I said, I'm Taiwanese, I'm from Taiwan. And then this is gonna sound so fake, but I swear to God, all of the other Chinese kids in the room, they turned around and looked at me, and they basically said all at once, like, that's the same thing. And that was, it became really kind of a turning point in my life, realizing actually what it means to be to be Taiwanese, especially when you're overseas, to have this narrative forced upon me that I am Chinese, even though I am not. I grew up in Taiwan. My family is Taiwanese. I have never ever considered myself Chinese. But yeah, that was my kind of like first realization that, oh, okay, so this actually affects my life. And then getting a bit older and getting more into politics and activism, and especially in the past two years, I think because I follow like the news a lot closer now, and I follow what the Chinese government says about us, it's really just kind of being accustomed to like a certain degree of threat, like a certain degree of, oh, maybe I will wake up tomorrow and my country will have been invaded, and in a week it would have been colonized by this neighboring country. And it's honestly a threat that I think is kind of at the back of every Taiwanese person's mind, and to the point where like we don't even care when China says that they're going to like invade us anymore, like because they say it so much. I know that the Pelosi visit has been brought up a lot, and I think that's a great example, is that China was throwing out threats like nilly-willy. They were saying that they were going to bomb Taiwan, that they were going to quote-unquote retake Taiwan, and Western analysts were all saying, oh, this is going to be the next the fourth Taiwan Strait crisis, and that Taiwan will be gone, like just a lot of things. And meanwhile, in Taiwan, we are so used to the Chinese saying that they are going to colonize us and invade us violently, that it just, we didn't take it seriously, because this is what we grew up with. This is what my parents grew up with. And it's kind of sad in a way, and maybe we're just numb and accustomed to it. But that's like a coping mechanism that you develop when you are Taiwanese. And I imagine that it's the same if you grow up Ukrainian. This is, it makes me very emotional to talk about it, because it's like, I have had people telling me that I am Chinese for like a large part of my life when I'm not, and so many Western people who have never stepped foot in Taiwan telling me that Taiwan is part of China, and that it's actually based if China invades Taiwan, and there are also there's a phrase that sometimes trends in Chinese social media, 留岛不留人, which means keep the island, not the people, which is basically, desire to genocide Taiwanese people and just take the island. And it's really fucked up.
Wow. Like, I have goosebumps, because this speaks to experience that we have as Ukrainians so much. This is just insane. I mean, one thing that you kind of understand it in theory, but then listening, a Taiwanese person saying those things, and then they speak to you despite that we do not share, history or culture, and literally live on the other side of the world from each other. This is very powerful. Thank you for sharing that. And I think like maybe it's also a perfect bridge to ask you, Aurora, one of our favorite questions about identity. I'm so excited to ask for the first time non-Ukrainian this question, but I feel like this is also important for everyone to hear. Like, if you can nail it down, what it means for you to be Taiwanese. And I will ask Olek the same question right after that, despite that he once already very famously answered it. But maybe something has changed. So Aurora, please go ahead if you don't mind, of course.
Okay, thank you. I think that is a very important question, and I have thought about this a lot, and many Taiwanese people I know, a lot of my friends, I know they've talked about this as well, and I think most simply put, being Taiwanese is having the choice to be Taiwanese, which is kind of circular. Is being Taiwanese is, for me, is having the freedom, living in a country where I have the freedom to decide if I'm Taiwanese or if I'm something else. It's being able to define what being Taiwanese is freely because we live in a democratic country. It's having friends who can call themselves Taiwanese and also call themselves Chinese because that is what they choose to do and they're comfortable with it. And it is also recognizing that being Taiwanese comes with a long history that can be divorced from the Republic of China, which is our government, and seeing that being Taiwanese is so much more than being a citizen of the Republic of China. Yes, being Taiwanese is just about having the choice to be Taiwanese.
Thank you so much. That's powerful. Olek, do you want to approach this once again? Maybe something has changed or since we last time asked you this question.
Yeah, since then I think me and Maria from Vinod Collective, we even made a post answering this question. Yeah, but I wanted to quickly make the comment about what Aurora mentioned about that phrase, 留岛不留人, keep the island, don't keep the people. I see this on the digital space, and I see, I want to believe, bots coming and commenting those whenever I write something about Taiwan. And it really scares me that people, the entire people, have to leave and generations grow up hearing that. And it's really scary to think of how children, especially, and teenagers can internalize this constant genocidal rhetoric, which, in Ukraine we also have, but it's a little bit different. So yeah, in that we bridge with the Taiwanese people a lot. And speaking about what being Ukrainian means to me, I don't know. I feel like you'll ask me 5 times and I'll give you a different answer each time. Loving Ukraine. That's as plain as it is. Loving Ukraine, and not just Ukraine since 1991, but understanding that there was Ukraine before and that there's Ukraine in our hearts, whatever it means to you. Whether it's a democratic way of living, or whether it's the beautiful fields of Ukrainian South, or whether it's the community. I think also being proud of the community is one part of Ukraine, being Ukrainian in 2022. We grew up with a traditional system of education telling us to be proud of, the biggest square in Europe, or the largest desert, whatever. If you're from Kherson, you know what it means. Of the biggest and earliest inventions and whatever. And I think right now is the time for Ukrainians to learn to be proud of the community. And I'm really proud and inspired to be a member of this movement. And I see many people here right now listening, of Ukrainians who understand for themselves what it is to be Ukrainian and what it takes to defend the country on all possible fronts.
Thank you so much, both Olek and Aurora. We're unfortunately running out of time. We could have this conversation forever and keep talking about Ukraine and Taiwan and the solidarity between the two countries and the people and the shared experiences, whilst they are different as well at the same time. So thank you so much both for taking the time to speak to us. I know it's also quite late in Taiwan right now, so thank you for being here with us on our first episode of season 2 and for doing our first bridge episode between Ukraine and another country. And I hope that through these conversations, we'll be able to build more and more solidarity globally, across the world, not just with Western countries, but with people everywhere. So thank you once again.
Yeah. There's a fantastic generation of Ukrainian allies all around the world who are, in many respects are honorary Ukrainian now after 6 months of unwavering support. And it's true honor to amplify Ukrainians, but also those honorary Ukrainians or our allies from around the world. Thank you so much, guys. That was honor on both accounts.
Thank you so much, and just wanted to say Героям слава.
Слава Україні, героям слава.
Thank you. Героям слава.
Quickly to thank all our patrons and everybody who joined. I mean, if you love this episode for the first time and you want to make sure we amplify more Ukrainian voices, build more bridges of solidarity, and decolonize more Ukrainian conversations, please become our Patreon on our Patreon page called Ukrainian Spaces. You get so much of cool content in return. You can also get front seat in asking questions, joining the broadcast and asking them in person or leaving them in comments, and we will do that job for you. So thank you so much for supporting us and making sure that this show and this initiative exists. We also launched our Twitter and Instagram accounts. And also this broadcast is recorded and then is going to be published as a podcast on all possible platforms: Spotify, Apple, Google, Anchor, Amazon, whatnot. Just find us there. But most importantly, when you listen, rate us and leave comments, because this helps us to trend. And we're already trending in more than 20 countries, entering top 100 podcasts. Because of that. So thank you for doing that in advance. But for now, it's all, apart from one thing, as always. Slava Ukraini. Thank you.